That authenticity in the way you deal with people in any situation is really important from an early professional standpoint, but also leadership later in your career. What I tried to do on those projects was there's a bond that's created with that person that ultimately gives you loyalty. And when you see that talent develop, you want to promote them, you want to give them more money, you want to help them as much as they're helping you. So it's a...
What's the legacy you hope to leave for your life's work?
I think true legacy is...
This is a story of legacy grit and quiet transformation. From a regional workshop in Noosa to the front lines of sovereign manufacturing in Australia, today's guest has not only inherited a business, but reshaped it. Ryza Garbacz is a second-generation managing director of NEACH, and under his leadership, the company has evolved from a local fabricator into a powerhouse supplier for some of the nation's most complex infrastructure projects. With a sharp eye for innovation, a deep commitment to quality, and a passion for regional resilience, Ryza brings the kind of perspective our industry needs right now. This isn't just a story of steel and standards, it's a story of vision, of holding true to values, and of quietly redefining what the Australian leadership looks like in our construction supply chain. Welcome to the Building Doors podcast. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
No worries.
I wanted to get stuck into it, as I always do in the episode, and start with where it all came from, where this seed was born to work in the sector that you do. Where did you start? Did you know that you were going to end up having a career working in manufacturing or not?
Well, I grew up on the Sunshine Coast. Obviously, that's where the business is,
Mm-hmm.
in a small town called Karoi. And look, I definitely had it bred into me from a young age. Dad started the company just before I was born, maybe 2 or 3 years before I was born. And I remember from about the age of 8, getting told by Dad that I had to do a couple of weeks every Christmas in the factory, sweeping floors and learning a little bit about the trade. I think Dad always felt like the trade would be a good fallback for me if I didn't choose to do something else in life. And he was building up this enterprise. Dad had, a vision of what he wanted to do with the business and where he wanted to get it to. And he was a very driven person. And he was very well supported by my mum as well. But look, in terms of myself, I spent a lot of childhood in the factory learning about the trade, and that then translated into me eventually going on to study engineering at QUT in Brisbane.
And so then you went out and you worked away from the family business for a period of time, which brought with its own knowledge and lessons that you could bring back. Tell me about that journey too, about when you decided to step into something slightly different.
Yeah, I knew straight away when I graduated from engineering that I didn't want to just go back into a family business. I had ambition, and I think I got that from my parents. They were really driven people. So I had a bit of adventure about me as well. I wanted to go and see the world and find about, those life lessons for myself. And, I went off and worked with Tees for 4 or 5 years and did a dam. I did a big refinery in Gladstone and an LNG plant up in Darwin, and started moving around the country building these big infrastructure projects. And I met a lot of people, made a lot of friends. I worked really hard. And I think once I got into that industry, you sort of get addicted to it. And I really enjoyed the challenge of getting onto these incredibly sophisticated and tough projects and working out how to solve the problems.
When you started to do that as well, what was some of I find people study at uni and then they go out into the sector and they find the things they learned are different to the things that they're learning on site. What were the biggest lessons you're coming out as an engineer, going into leadership? What were the hardest lessons to learn?
Oh, look, the funniest thing is that when you get to site for the first time as a graduate, everyone pretty much tells you on your first day, it's going to be another 4 or 5 years until you're actually useful. And I sort of put that as a challenge to myself. I felt like the grounding I'd had with my parents in the business as a young person growing up in a family that had a small, medium enterprise, I had a bit more experience than a lot of the other people my age coming out of university. And that sort of did translate as well. In my career, I progressed pretty quickly because I was able to prove to the people on site that I was practically minded. I did have some, street knowledge, if you want to call it that. And I think the hardest part, though, was identifying that I wasn't going to be paid as much as I thought I was for a long period of time. It was going to take even longer, even though I had a tertiary education, to get up to a level of income that I felt was going to sustain me in my career. And it wasn't anything that I was being greedy about. It was just one of those things you think, I've studied all this time, I'm going to get a good income, but then you start pretty much at the bottom. And I think it was about 3 or 4 years until I was earning more than a tradesperson, even though I'd done 4 years of university. So that was a bit of a rude awakening. Having said that, though, I think once I got onto those job sites, I learnt that the tradespeople that were around me on those sites and all the different types of trades as well, because I'd been really focused on just the steel trade through my family. I got exposure to carpenters, electricians, and a whole range of other really technical trades on those refinery sites. My knowledge base just started expanding rapidly, and I really worked out, I chose a very good career in doing civil engineering because you can really broaden out across all those disciplines and learn so much. And I just became a sponge. University was that first step. It was like the gate was open. Now I can walk out into the real world and learn a lot more again.
How important do you think it was? So going out into the world, doing engineering, and then you're exposed to all these different trades, all these massive kind of projects. How important now, if you reflect in the role that you're on, how important was that for your leadership journey when you came back to NEACH?
Oh, it was fundamental. I went on a really interesting journey through that first decade of my career working for these multinationals. And, it taught me systems, it taught me structure, it taught me accountability, it taught me data, how important data is. And, that sort of information and that training and that structure around how to do your job professionally, I don't know if you get that grounding in an SME environment as much as you would in that larger environment. So you're dealing with very big projects, huge budgets, huge pressures. The capital cost of those projects is enormous. So the clients really want them finished on time. Hey, we're going to invest billions of dollars. We're going to build this LNG facility. We need that to be finished by this date so we can start getting the return on investment. So you get used to that pressure cooker environment. It does have some negatives, but on the whole, as a professional in that young phase of your career, it's amazing. And I couldn't recommend it highly enough for, young aspiring professionals to go into those types of environments because you're really going to learn a lot in a very short space of time.
And when you said, one of the things you said before, which I found interesting, was when they sort of said, you're not going to be able to add value for a few more years. And you said that was a challenge. And I think this is something young people always ask me all the time. How do I get ahead? How do I progress? When you saw that as a challenge, did you take more initiative, or what did you actually tangibly do at that point to go, okay, challenge accepted?
Exactly, yeah. Look, what I did was, I think when you get onto those projects, a lot of it does come down to your character and your personality and, I hate to say it, likability. So one thing, my father's a very big character, and I watched him in life and I saw how easily he navigated lots of tough situations just because he was very likable. And I worked really hard on that, not trying to be fake, but authentic. That authenticity in the way you deal with people in any situation is really important from an early professional standpoint, but also leadership later in your career. And what I tried to do on those projects was get in with people, because my thing was I wanted to learn from them. And I made it very clear very early on that I was willing to help them as much as they needed me to learn what they knew. And I think being likable and being open and showing them that I didn't know everything. I didn't turn up going, oh, look, I've got all this knowledge and credibility. I've worked in this factory. I didn't turn up with a silver spoon in my mouth. I turned up saying to them, I want to learn from you. And for me, that was probably the way that I was able to progress fairly quickly through the corporate ladder. I learnt from those people. They respected me because I listened really well. And then I put rubber on the road and showed them the lessons that they had taught me and put them into practice. So that was just a snowball that pushed me along, and I kept getting promoted and worked my way up through the project chains pretty quickly. I think by the age of about 28, I had about 400 people reporting to me on a project in Hunter Valley.
Wow.
Running about a $70 million job. I was getting paid very well for that. I had some engineers come to our factory recently, and we did an open day for about 14 engineers from Brisbane. And I gave them a bar graph of my income. I said, this is where I started.
Yeah.
And I said, and it showed it. I went up, and then I came back down, and then I went up, and then I took over a business and it went to zero.
Yeah.
So I sort of was saying to them, you're going to have good times and then downs and then ups, but on the whole, you are going to head that way over time. You've just got to be patient.
Oh, and it's a massive lesson for, diversification in your career or taking different pathways, because I think if we can get too set on our salaries being at a certain level for our whole career, we miss the opportunity to grow into something bigger or to take something to the next level and take a risk as well.
Oh, absolutely. I had to work really hard for my grades. I wasn't a gifted student by any means. I think I got an OP of 8 from high school. I was on the old QCST system back in the day.
Me too. Yep.
So I think you needed a 10 to get into engineering in that time. And then one of the other things I was telling the students was I was not a very good student in my first 2 years of uni. I partied a lot. I had a very good time. I actually remember.
No regrets though. I don't have any regrets.
I remember when I moved to uni, I was still 17 and moved out of home, and had a share house, and it wasn't obviously old enough to buy beer, but I worked out you could buy all the ingredients for beer in the supermarket. So we just brewed it instead.
Such an engineer.
Took me a bit longer, but I engineered my way out of that one.
I love that. And I think as well, uni is an experience to be enjoyed as well. So it's, and you are right as well, because you're also building social connections, those group assignments, and there's things like that you're learning at uni. One of the questions we always used to ask graduates was how they'd handle it if somebody wasn't pulling their weight in the thesis. Best question, because it's like, well, that's what you're going to have to deal with sometimes in projects. You're going to have people in your team that aren't pulling their weight, things like that as well.
Well, exactly. And then coming back to what I was saying about my marks, like I ended up taking a gap year after 2 years of uni. I went off to do a ski season in America, and I was meant to come back and I didn't. And I ended up going on this wild, adventurous travel across America. I ended up on a yacht sailing to Panama, went through the Panama Canal. It goes on. But what ended up happening in that year, I realized that I needed a skill behind me. I needed a skill. And when I came back, I was so motivated at university. My grades jumped a whole 1.5 GPA average points, and I finished with a really good mark, and I was very happy and proud about that. And coming back to the skills in Australia, when I look at the business that I now run, and I hope I'm not jumping too far ahead here, I see these young apprentices coming in to do their trades, and they're so gifted with their hands and their ability to do the trade work. It's a no-brainer when I see them. I look at them and I go, wow, you've got so much talent. Is this what you want to do? And they're like, yeah, I'm not sure. I said, well, how are you going at school? And if they're in year 11 or 12, I'm generally pretty straight with them now and say, well, listen, if you're going to do a trade, you don't need year 11 and 12. No. By the time you finish your trade, you're going to be equivalent to high school anyway. And you can be a year or two in front of where you need to be in life, because school's basically a social exercise for you rather than a professional one. If you're going to go to university, that's a different story. You should maybe stick with high school. But if you want to do your trade, and I'm looking at you and you're skilled, you need to have a good think about it. So typically we get a lot of kids coming to us on work experience, and we guide them in like that. And we've had some really successful outcomes with young people coming into the business in that respect.
Tell me about one of the outcomes that you're proud of. So where you've had someone come through the business.
Oh, I got a really good example. We had, so my parents live up in Karoi, and they're on acreage. And as they got a bit older, my mother was a school teacher, and there was a point where she was working in a special needs area with kids that were having some learning disabilities. And there was one particular student, and she said to him, hey, how would you like to earn some pocket money on a weekend? And he said, yeah, I'd be interested in that. So my parents offered him some labouring work around their property. And anyway, I'd been in the business maybe 2 or 3 years at that point, and Dad had this young kid come out and work with him for probably 3 or 4 weeks, and Dad rings me. He says, "Mate, this kid can work. You have to give him a go." So Dad got in his ear and said, "Hey, look, why don't you come and have a chat to me, have a chat to Ryza about working at NEACH." So he came down. We organised some work experience. He did a few weeks of it, and he was amazing. So this is a kid that was by the education system deemed as someone that had a learning difficulty. But when we put him in that trade environment, he was exceptional, absolutely exceptional. So he started his trade. He did a full apprenticeship with us and blitzed it. And he's been working in the business over 10 years now, and he is one of our senior top tradesmen.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, there's not all systems suit everybody, you know, and it is a bit of a one size fits all in some parts of our society in the way that we have to navigate it. Yeah. And we've got to try to guide the people within the system to get the best out of them. And sometimes staying the course in high school isn't it. I mean, back in the day, most people finished at year 10. And that was it. The education system was set up so that you got enough education by year 10 to go out and do what you were going to do, unless you were going to go to tertiary education. And that 11 and 12 was an extended education to get you to that higher level of learning to get you into university. So somewhere we lost the way, and we've had a huge drain on trade apprenticeships over the last 2 decades, and we're really paying for it now in the industry. We've got a big trade shortage. And that's one of the other reasons I went down the path of pushing into our own apprenticeship program. But that one example I just gave you, I've got many more just like it.
It's so interesting. And I think, you know, it's something we want to protect, is keeping manufacturing in Australia, is supporting that as the backbone of our economy as well. Like, we need it.
Oh, absolutely.
And we've got all this work coming up with the Olympics and things like that. This is something where we should be proudly encouraging our young people to consider a pathway into trades as well. Because I think there was, you know, in the past there's been this rhetoric around, you go to university, you get a job, and if you can't cut it at school, you get a trade. But I think we need to look at celebrating trade as a career choice. These people are gifted in a different way. There's not one way to be gifted. You know, some people are gifted academically. Some people are more gifted with their hands and what they can create. And I think that what you've hit there is something that we need to, as an industry, really start to celebrate more, is trade and why it's a career choice.
And the great thing about trade is the skills that it provides to the community. Like like at the moment when COVID hit, the supply chains all got rattled, you know, and everything went a bit funny, and people moved around, and house prices went nuts. I have to go over it in detail, but everyone's got their own version of, you know, the impact it's had. And when you look at just getting stuff done now, it takes a lot longer today than it did pre-2020. And a lot of that comes back to people's change on their view of life, how hard they want to work, where they want to live. It's all been disrupted. And we're still, I think, rebalancing since that's taken place. But I'll say this, in the last probably 12 months, or even just now, if I use a current example, we put out advertisements for a couple of grad roles about 3 weeks ago. We're interviewing at the moment. I've had 350 applications for 2 graduate roles in my business.
Wow.
I put an apprentice ad up last week, and I've had 40 applications. So I think the tide has turned. People realise that they are really worthy professions and careers to choose in this industry, and there's a lot of interest again to come through. I mean, engineering's different because it's white collar, but the blue collar, I think it's turned, and the apprentices are there. There's so many people keen to get into trades again, which is great to see because they're paying well. Obviously, we've hit that point where there's an acute shortage and the wages go up because we're all searching and battling, and there's a talent war on out there. And that's then in turn promoted it to the younger generations now leaving school going, well, yeah, trades are paying well. Let's go and do it.
And I think as well, I've spoken to a few young people. They're very conscious of AI at the moment too,
yeah.
and how that's going to disrupt. And we know for a fact, well, what's AI going to find it much more difficult to disrupt is trades.
It is,
because that's tangibly people using their hands, problem solving, working physically, doing the work. So
100%. And it's funny you say that because a couple of the big tier ones I work with are starting to put AI into their project systems, and they're leaning their project teams out effectively just with reduction in administrative workload through more efficient systems that are coming off the back of AI. So I think there's reshaping taking place right now in that market. So that white collar market definitely has adjustment ahead of it. And when you look at a small, medium enterprise like mine, I employ 30 to 40 people. I fluctuate in size depending on workload. I've been up as many as 50 people in my direct workshop. But if you included my subcontractors and other people that we employ, we'd be up around about 100 people, I think, total in terms of total workforce that we would be directly and indirectly engaging to do the work that we do. And the sites themselves are only getting busier. There's more and more demand for work to be done. Southeast Queensland and that Olympic workload that's coming at us, there's an absolute tsunami. I mean, I've been to a couple of the QMCA meetings with yourself, and when Andrew gets up there and he puts his charts on the screen and you look at what's ahead of us, it's like, I'm already thinking, how do I protect my business from this talent war that's coming at us?
Yeah.
And you need to do a lot of things within your business to start thinking about how to make it a good place to work, giving people a little bit of flexibility in the construction space, which is always hard to do, to manage their work-life balance and maintain their family at a good level, but also get that income. Pay them well, give them, a little bit of piece of the action if the business is doing well as well.
One of our clients, one of our clients I find really interesting, whatever the person asks for, they offer more every time I've seen them do it. And the person is always delighted and accepts the offer and then goes in and like that, they're instantly elated. And so much goes on in my head when you talk about the fact that you've been able to retain a tradesperson for 10 years.
Yes.
So let's talk about what have you learned that works to retain good people? Because I think so often we focus on, and I'm a recruiter, so I understand there's a skill shortage, war on talent, all of that, there's not enough people, but there's this massive, I guess, advantage that you've got with when you can retain someone for 10 years in your business, you're onto something. So there's something that you're doing. Share with us.
Talent pipeline. Build your talent. If you keep bringing in people just that are already experienced and have learned everything everywhere else, your retention on those people is going to be lower than someone that you've brought in from the grassroots and you've given them your time, your effort, your knowledge, your experience. There's a social contract there that's unwritten, and there's a bond that's created with that person that ultimately gives you loyalty. And when you see that talent develop, you want to promote them, you want to give them more money, you want to help them as much as they're helping you. So I think it's a much healthier way to build up a company over a longer period of time. And I think the point there is, if you take a short-term view, you're going to hire in people, you're going to throw money at them, and they'll stay for a period of time. But I don't think they'll ultimately be as happy as someone that you bring in and trade up as talent through your business. So I think the quick, easy answer to that is build your talent, invest in it, and you will build a business that's got your culture. They're learning the way that you do it. They're not coming in with these other habits that you're having to overcome and build, or change to get them into the way that you do things. Authenticity is a big one as well. I think when you deal with people, they can smell it. Looking them in the eye, telling them what you think, being direct but calm rather than reactive and loud. My approach is definitely try to keep the calm and be as open and transparent as I can about what's happening. We do a lot of toolbox sessions and other things like other companies do, but I really don't hold back with what's happening in the business. I tell them about the challenges. If there's things happening in the business that I'm not happy with, we talk about those. But then we always celebrate the wins as well. Even we had no NCRs this month, or we haven't had an LTI for 100 days. Like, we celebrate that stuff. And that builds that community within the business. And that's how you retain people, in my view.
And this is one thing that you touched on then that I think is also really important for companies to think of in terms of culture. How do you retain your culture when we're about to be hit with a big pipeline of work? So that there'll be that succession planning, that talent pipeline work that you're talking about, which is absolutely crucial. Then there's going to be this period where it's like, whoa, geez, we've been hit with a whole bunch of work and we need to hire as well. How do you balance hiring, if you have to hire from external or even promoting from within, whatever the case might be? How do you keep your culture when things are growing? Because you've even mentioned how you've had to scale up and then sort of come back depending on what's going on in the market. How do you keep that culture?
Oh, look, I'm already planning. I'm always about 5 years in front of where the business is. And I'm forecasting, fairly significant growth over the next 5 years. Our revenue is likely to double in that period. And I'm making moves right now with my expenses and overheads with my team that don't line up with my current workload. So, as a business owner, I'm taking a hit on a more expensive operation, but I know that's an investment in future capacity. So for me as the director, I'm balancing that growth with the future, and I know that what's coming. But if I do nothing now, I'm going to lose that culture. So it comes back to your key point. Culture's so important. There was a period probably about 7 years ago, I had to pretty much gut my apprentice program because I had a couple of bad attitudes come into that cohort. And one of the risks with young people is that they get cliquey, and I tried my best to keep them integrated with the more mature staff in my business, to keep them guided and to keep them directed. But when they get together, sometimes they can go off course. We had a couple of bad attitudes come in and we didn't stay in front of it. And it was a real hard lesson for me because I had to let 3 or 4 people go. It just got to a point where I was like, this is toxic. And I'm not going to have it in my workplace. So you've got to have that courage too to make the hard decisions when it comes to it. And we worked through that and we restarted. And that set a very clear message to the rest of the team as well around what the expectation was around conduct, teamwork, culture, and being in an environment that everyone enjoys every day. Because if you're turning up, you think about the amount that you do work, you spend a lot of time at work.
You do.
And you don't want to be going to a place that isn't nice to be in. And I'm always mindful of that. I always want to make sure that people are turning up to a job that they feel challenged in, they're feeling rewarded, and there's a return for them that they feel's commensurate with the effort they're putting in.
You know what I found interesting? I'd love your thoughts on it. I feel like businesses, you've talked about you scale up, scale back, adapt. There's this massive requirement of adaptability in small to medium businesses that is different to just working for a tier one because things change in line with market and where the business is heading is changes too. So when you're looking at the right cultural fit in terms of either your apprentices or people that you're hiring in, what are some of the qualities you look for? Like, for instance, is it adaptability, initiative, whatever that might be, team players? I don't know. But have you started to nut out, you have a couple of anyone that tells me, I don't know a single business owner or leader that hasn't gone, oh, I hired this one person once, or I've had a couple. Most people have had countless times where against everything, either it didn't pan out or, they went into separate directions because the business was going one way and the person was heading another. Everyone's been through that. But now you had these bad apples. What did you learn from that around the qualities, not necessarily the experience, but the qualities that made a good apprentice or a good culture fit for your business?
Yeah, well, I mean, the very first one, without going straight to your question, is fail fast. Don't let it go too long. Like trust your gut. Every time I've gone against my gut instinct, I've ended up in a tough situation. I've run the business 14 years now, and I can honestly say I'm finally at a point within the last 3 or 4 years where I know as soon as my gut tells me there's an issue here, I jump on it.
Yeah.
I don't even think twice now. I just run with it. My instinct's pretty sharp, and I know that I've got to trust myself and just work through the situation, have the hard conversations. I think a lot of people avoid hard conversations. So one of the things I talk to people about when I interview them, I'm like, how transparent are you willing to be? And they often ask me what I mean by that. I say, well, if I sit down here and I say to you, Lauren, I'm not happy with these things that are taking place at the moment, or the quality of the work that you're doing right here isn't up to standard, how are you going to go when I give you that feedback? I'm not going to do it in a way that offends you. I'm going to be open about it, but I'm going to be direct. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And I need you to learn. I need you to just have that hard conversation and be able to take it. And can you take it? That's really it. Because the thing is, when someone joins a business, they have to adapt.
Yeah.
So for me, I say that very clearly to them. Lauren, you will need to adapt to our culture. This is what our culture looks like. How are you going to do that? And they give me some explanations on what they'll do to learn the people. And like I said to you in the early part of my career, for me, that likability thing was all about adapting to the culture, knowing the person, having a meaningful relationship with them and showing them that I wanted to learn from them.
Yeah.
And as soon as they knew that I was on their team and I was listening to them and I respected them, it was easy. You know, so I think once I can see that an employee's got that ability to learn, be open-minded and take feedback, it's a pretty easy forward path from there. But if I find that that's a fairly closed loop and they're not really willing to come on the journey, then there's risk.
That's a really great one, is transparency, because it's not someone I've never seen in a job ad that someone said, I'm looking for someone that's very transparent, but it's a massive asset in a business if you have that transparency, because you're trying to, the only way we can improve is with feedback. But the other thing is that where we hire someone initially, as the business evolves and changes, what we need from them and where the business heads can be completely different.
The fastest path to more efficiency in your business is through transparency. If you don't get that feedback, how can you improve?
You can't.
So we've got a really good continuous improvement culture in our business. We learn, we openly admit when we've made errors. I stick my hand up all the time. I tell the staff that I am not perfect. You're better at so many more things that I can do, and that's why you work here.
Yes.
I'm not better than you at it. You're better than me at it. And I'm happy to pay you to do that.
Yeah.
So I don't pretend for a minute that I'm an expert in everything. I just, my crowning glory is being able to build a team that has the right capabilities and expertise in the right areas. And as a group, we work really well.
One of the things you talked about that is a bit of your forte, which I do want to know a bit more around, is data. Because we've spoken in the past about how you were able to come in and look at the data to make business decisions. And I think that's a really powerful insight for people in leadership roles. Because let's be honest right now, a lot of businesses are in the phase that we know the work's coming, but we're in a bit of a lull, at the moment, just waiting for things to drop. But everyone knows it's coming. There's no question of whether it's coming, but there's a little bit of, okay, where to next? Making business decisions. And you're thinking 5 years ahead, right?
Yep.
Tell me about how data influences your decision and why it's important for leaders to start thinking like that as well.
Data doesn't lie.
Yeah.
Simple as that. Look, my first decade that I worked in the tier one space, I got a lot of exposure to really interesting systems and data capture methods that helped me in my business. When I got into the company, I was great at, so in the later part of my career, I'd go in and help. I got on some projects that were in trouble and I'd get thrown in there and say, can you try and sort this out and get it on track for us? And I was given a budget, I was given a specification, and I was given a schedule. And they'd say, do what you can. And I would set about pulling it apart, building a good schedule, building a good team, building a structure that team could operate through, and a good discipline every week with meetings and coordination and communication. And it was a pretty simple recipe, but it worked for me time and again. When I got into the business, I initially came back to this business for a couple of months. I wasn't planning to take it over. I got a call from my folks who owned the business at the time, and they said, "Look, we're in trouble. Can you come and have a look at it with us? Give us a hand." And I did. And 2 months turned into 6 months, and then 6 months turned into I'm going to buy the company.
Yeah.
Then there's a few other reasons in there, but the long and short of that is when I got into the business, I knew how to run projects really well, and I turned the company into a project. A lot of people talk about the infinite game. I don't know whether you've heard that.
No, I haven't. Share with us about the infinite.
Well, the infinite game is like you're turning up and doing a job, and I think it's Simon Sinek who talks a lot about it. But the infinite game is like, you've got to be the best you can every day. How do you do that? If it's never ending, what's that look like? So for me, I don't necessarily take the exact same view. What I do is I look at the business as a 5-year project. Okay, I got a 5-year schedule, I got a 5-year budget, I got a 5-year specification. What do I got to get done in that time? And I set myself very strict goals around that, and I work to them. And I think once you've got that focus and you've got that routine and you've got that system of updating it, it turns that infinite game into an achievable target. Because in business you are trying to build something up that is sort of never ending. You finish a project, when's the next one? Feed it into the machine again, off we go. But with the analytical side, when I got into the company, everyone talks about what are the traditions and other things. When you get into a business that you take over, that tradition for me is the foundation. It's not the ceiling. I looked at the business and I said, it's got a very good foundation. You have to be brutally honest about the realities that you're faced with as well. And the fresh set of eyes that I brought in, I pulled everything apart and I looked at what was working, what wasn't financially, and I was brutal. I was like, well, that's losing money. And then you would look at, well, what's the strategic advantage of that? Is it worth holding even if we are losing money? Does it provide indirect revenue in another way? If it's a no, it's got to go. And that's really the way I set about slowly growing the business. I took the business when I walked in, I think it was about 15 or 20 people. I took it back to about 6 people. And then I built it up to about 50 over the next 4 or 5 years. I slowly pulled it back out of where it was. And it was just ruthless accounting and assessment on that analytical data set that I'd built. I really didn't know how to read a P&L and a balance sheet either. And I took my engineering skills to it and worked out a way to articulate all of the different costs. I remember having a conversation with an accountant at one point. He walked in and he said, what's it costing you to do that? And I said, $14.56 an hour. And he goes, excuse me? And I said, yeah, $14.56 an hour. He goes, you know that to the cent? I said, yeah, I know everything here to the cent. He goes, I've never met anyone that knows that. And I said, well, how can you run a business if you don't know the numbers? And he goes, yeah, that's a really good point. And he goes, everyone says that, Ryza, but not everyone does it. And I said, well, I don't want to be here if I don't know the information. That's the way I've always been. And I think that mindset really helped me. That's my engineering background that I translated into a business skill. And that adaptability, becoming from a project manager to a business manager, and being able to reframe what a 5-year plan looks like as a project plan, and then using that analytical capability on my P&L and my balance sheet to drive the business. That's how I sort of translated it all.
I want your views on a question that, I dealt with a legal consultant once that I was talking with around professional services and just our model and how we wanted to work, because I didn't really maybe resonate as much with more traditional recruitment agencies, right? So I was picking his brain around how does professional services work, and he was talking around business team me. And he's like, you have to have like a ranking order of how you make decisions. And sometimes you're going to have to make business decisions that are hard for you personally. So putting that business and the team, in priority. Where did it sit for you when you're looking at a business? Where do you sort of slot it in? Do you make the decisions on the business and the team and then put yourself last, or where does the pecking order work for you?
Look, for me, it's all about sustainability. Like, what do you want for your company? Do you want it to be there in 5 years or 10 years' time?
Yeah.
Like, and what decisions do you need to make to ensure that?
Mm.
So, I've made a couple of really hard decisions. I remember when I first took the company over, we had a whole rigging division,
Mm-hmm.
and the fleet of cranes and equipment that we had in that division were aging rapidly. So I upgraded the whole thing, spent a lot of money doing that. It's a very capital intensive service to provide to the market. And I didn't do enough homework on working out what my revenue streams were going to be like. And I came up against some real key strategic issues, like my competitors wouldn't use my equipment. So when I was short of work for my own rigging division, I really couldn't get work for it anywhere else.
No.
So, I had to spin it off. And I was thinking about spinning it off into another company, but in the end I sold the division to another crane hire business that was looking to expand, and that worked really well. But long and short of it, I've made some poor decisions around that, and I've learnt really quickly, not to take those decisions too lightly, especially when there's a lot of capital involved. But when I think about a ranking order of decisions, there's matrices and other things you can do around risk. I think it comes back to risk at the end of the day. Like, what's the risk associated with that? Is it a high risk? Is it a low risk? And are there other options? Can I de-risk it and still get the same financial outcome? What is it that we're trying to achieve? One of the things that I always found funny about my market was a lot of my competitors saw what I was doing with the business, and I took a very different view. A lot of my competitors are trade-based people that have built companies up, whereas that was definitely my father's journey to the company I now own. But my journey was like learning about the company and then working as an engineer out in the market, and then coming back into it with a very different perspective. I came into it with from my client's perspective into my company, and that was super powerful because I knew what my customer wanted. So I sat on the customer side of the fence for a decade. And then when I got back into the business, I was like, I know what they want. I found out the secret, and then I set about building these systems and a really pragmatic approach to developing the company in a way that suited them. So all of the work that I did on those systems was designed to dovetail into my customers to service them really easily. So every time we finish a project, it's like, there you go, there's all the information you want. And even as we're going along, it's the same.
Seeing this massive shift, like even in some of the roles we're recruiting at the moment, to people that have worked in, like still maybe in the same sector, but worked client side, consultancy, contract, supply chain. And when I see people that have worked in different areas, the all-encompassing skills that they have is super powerful, then if they've just worked in the same company again and again for years and years, there's something to be said. And I think more and more companies are also looking at people that have diverse skills, like diversification in their skill sets, like people that come through that offer different perspectives from different sectors of the market. That's a really powerful competitive advantage, I think, that you brought.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if you've got an open mind and you can understand different things, like I've gone back into structural steel, but for that decade I was out there, I was a site manager working with Bechtel, for instance, and I ran 5 or 6 major subcontracts. I think that one of the last projects I was on was about 800 million, and we were doing a coal loader expansion. There was a civil contractor, there was an electrical contractor, there was a structural contractor, there were mechanical contractors. There was a whole range of different people on there, and just getting that broad exposure across all the different trades really set me up well, because even in the niche market that we operate in now, I know what my product has to be able to deal with when it gets to site. So the team that I work with understands that really clearly as well, and I've given them a lot of that knowledge, but they've also come into the team with some of that some of that knowledge themselves. And when you understand what the external factors are impacting your product when you put it into a marketplace, you can only add more value. And that's one of the key things we really try to offer our customers, is just that knowledge and experience around improving their product. And that's another sovereign capability benefit that you get working with local contractors here, is that if you offshore your work, you don't get a lot of that value add.
No.
And it's not when they make decisions about, it's cheaper, it's not a full life cycle decision that you're looking at there. You're not going to consider all the gains that you're going to make as you go through that design phase before we start making it.
And are you seeing it, there's more opportunity? If we're looking at sovereign capability, is there more opportunity to work collaboratively? We're talking about collaborative contracting, right?
Yes,
So we
yeah.
want the client to work with the contractor, but it also comes with the contractor
Yep.
working with supply chain.
Mm.
And it's, you know, for me, I definitely see some benefits of working collaboratively to make sure that you're improving the product together.
I think manufacturing in Australia is far from dead. We are in a massive transition at the moment, and we've got so much opportunity in front of us. Innovation is mission critical for our industry and the wider economy writ large. You know, we've got to find some serious productivity over the next decade in Australia, and there's plenty of low-hanging fruit there to be picked for the people that are willing to take some risk. I see so many baby boomers transitioning to retirement right now that own companies, that I'm encouraging younger people to say, hey, look around the market. There's plenty of people wanting to get out. Now's the time to get in with a business where you can work your way up into it, and then maybe vendor finance, a buyout, or whatever it might be. And I think about what I did with my company. It was so old and traditional in its approach to everything. I just made that the foundation, respected its past. I worked with all those old relationship and habits, and then I modernized it into a version that allowed it to grow like it has. And I just see that happening across the whole market. So I feel like we're on a bit of a precipice at the moment. It hasn't quite happened yet, but we're about to see a real flip across the market in terms of who owns the business. There's going to be people transitioning out, especially with a lot of these super fund and super tax changes that the Labor government want to bring in. I think a lot of people will want to exit, and that's going to accelerate it. And so we've got a next generation. I think over the next decade it's going to be really exciting. And I think people that are saying that it's dead at the moment, I think we're just in transition.
Yeah, we're just in a transition. We're waiting for things to kick off.
Yeah,
you know,
100%.
I say to people, it's calm before the storm.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's what you do with this time right now to right size and make sure that your business has the right skills and.
Oh, there's absolutely a Goldilocks zone. And I've always said that about my business. People come into me and say, oh, mate, you've got such a good recipe here. Why don't we grow it? And I'm like, what for? Like, I'm going so well right now. And I've seen a lot of other companies in my market get really big. And then you've got to feed that machine when it's quiet, and they struggle. You know, they've got to size back down, and they've got all this overhead, and it's really hard pulling a business down and then bringing it back up. You really, if you're going to grow a company, you want a good, steady path of growth. And, you know, if you do have investors, that can be a difficult path to walk because they're going to want to see the return, you know, so they want to see that exponential growth. But at the same time, is it sustainable? And that's the question I always ask myself. How sustainable is that growth? Like if we take that project on, we can jump up to there very quickly, but is that too early? Are we better to take a couple of smaller projects as stepping stones to get to that point? And the answer is always yes. You know, you can sometimes survive a big jump up, but then you've got to build that team very quickly around you to support it.
You do.
And that's why I take a longer term view on that culture shift and that team size that you're trying to expand.
So for all the work you're doing, you know, the career you've had, you know, obviously having a young family as well that are going to be going through, probably you might get them in the holidays and their business.
I've already had them on the sweeper. They're already on the sweeper.
On the sweeper. What's the legacy you hope to leave for your life's work? Everyone says this sounds like a funeral question. It's not.
Oh, look, I think true legacy is building something that can survive without you. That's if you want my honest opinion about that. Like, people talk about all these other visions, but ultimately, like if you can build something as a business that transitions to a phase of operation without you around, that's some proper legacy. Because we hit 50 years this year.
Congratulations.
I know. And when you look at the numbers of SMEs that survive 50 years of continuous operation, it's tiny. Like it's a you know, hats off to my folks for that first 35 years that they ran it. You know, it's a real credit to them. They went through some really tough recessions, and they did some hard times. And I know when I took over, I don't think I drew a wage for 12, 18 months initially to get the business back to where it needed to be. But it was a good risk and a really worthwhile one, and I'm stoked that I did that. But, you know, I think that legacy is, you know, creating a business that can stand the test of time once you've handed it on to the next generation.
I think that's a great example. 50 years is just a massive achievement.
Yeah.
Like, congratulations to you and your family. It's not easy.
No.
And I think, you know, you've brought in so much fresh ideas and so much lessons that you've learnt from projects, and the business sounds like it's evolved so much from where it was. But what I like is that you didn't lose the tradition of where it came from either. You didn't come in and just try to reinvent everything. You sort of went, there's some good things and fundamentals here. How do we build upon that?
Yeah, and the other thing too is don't chase growth for the sake of growth.
Mm.
Like, it's got to be meaningful growth. Like, what are you actually adding to the market? Like, it's got to be, for me, it's got to be via technology, innovation, capability.
Mm.
If you're doing those things and you're gaining growth through those key areas, then that's a worthwhile pursuit. But if you're just doing business as usual and you're like, let's get bigger, well, okay, that's good. That might last in a hot market, but what's going to happen when the market comes back?
Yeah.
So, you know, you got to always look at what your base operating level is and make sure that you've got a business set up around that.
Rocket round. So this next one's a bit of fun.
Okay.
We always just ask a few questions just to get to know you a little better, because this is obviously about your business journey.
Oh, dear.
To get to know you personally. Coffee or wine?
Wine.
Wine. Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Every day. Hardly anyone says cats.
I know.
And favourite holiday destination?
Oh, that's a tough one. Snow.
Snow. Really? Skier or a snowboarder?
I'm a skier.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm a skier too.
Yeah.
Not very good at it. I did
love
it as
it.
a kid. It's good fun though.
Yeah.
And what podcast do you listen to?
Diary of a CEO.
I love that one.
Yeah, that's been awesome. I'm really enjoying that. I do listen to a bit of Joe Rogan, a bit controversial, but he's got some interesting people on there.
You've got to be committed as well,
You do,
because they're like 2.5, so you've got to be able to get in the car and then know that you're not going to finish the episode and you're going to get back in and keep going with it. So, and Diary of a CEO was good. Went on a medical tangent for a while, but I think it's back. I think it's back to just, you know, the general content that we love about business. And what makes you feel like you're home?
Oh, just being able to walk along a beach and be around my family and get time to myself. I mean, one of the reasons I took over, I decided to stick with the business and give it a crack. The business was on its knees. It was in a really tough place when I went back to help out with it. And after about 2 years, I bought it. And what I said to myself was, I'm going to give myself 5 years to get this thing going. And if I can't make a good return on it in 5 years, then I'm going to go back to my career as an engineer working for Tier 1. And that was going really well before I went back there. But in that first 2 years, well, it was probably even the first 6 months really, that I went back to help out initially. And I thought I was only going to be there 6 months. I started running through the national park, surfing again, spending a lot of time in nature. And that is really important, that grounding. I mean, we talk a lot about business and profession and everything else. You've got to have that balance. And I think in that earlier part of my career, I lost that. You know, I had 2 long-term relationships in that part of my career and I couldn't hold them down. And I think that was because I was working so much. And that would be some advice that I'd share with young people. I think it might have changed a bit in the modern day. I'm not sure, working for Tier 1, but I was consistently punching 60, 70, sometimes more than 70 hours a week, working 6 or 7 days a week on those sites. And that's not healthy. And when I went back to the coast and took the business on, I was earning, I think I went from earning like 300 grand a year back to earning nothing. And I chose that.
Yes.
You know, and I stuck with it. And that for me was a real tell. I was like, hang on, I'm so much happier. I don't have that career and that ladder that I'm climbing or the money, but I have happiness. And that I chose happiness. And I think that I got good karma out of that because I was helping my family as well. And the business, I just poured myself into that. That was a good little pursuit. And over the last 14 years, it's just gone back to strength to strength.
I love that choose happiness. And I think we can all fall into the trap of thinking it's all about climbing the career ladder, but everyone's definition of happiness and what they bring to their role or bring to their career and what gives them joy is different. You know, I'm on a farm and that brings me joy. 11 donkeys brings me joy. People would say that's crazy.
That's a lot of ass.
A lot of ass. But, like you can't lose connection with that. That's so funny. I'm not going to forget that. And someone's going to text me listening to this episode and say that's a lot of ass. Well, I'm not going to lose that one. But yeah, you've got to make time to reconnect. And I think if anyone's listening to this episode, and I know there's some of you were listening and feeling like that, just don't forget to reconnect to nature or whatever that might be for you, whether that's sport, whether that's surfing. Like, you've got to make time for it. I agree completely.
Yeah, I think in anything you do in life, you've got to keep it at a human level. Like, we're not robots.
No.
We're not AI. We're not any of that. We're people. And we are animals, really, at the end of the day, on the face of the earth. We've all got to try and get along.
Yep.
And we've got to try to enjoy ourselves while we're here.
Yeah. And you know what? If you can just bring joy and a bit of happiness to people's day, like, that's a purpose too.
Yeah.
Every day, if you can come in and whether you're doing a trade and you know that you've done your very best job and the work you're producing is fantastic, or if you're going home happier to your kids and making their lives easier, running them around to 50 million sports or whatever that might be, your purpose shifts to different stages in your life. I 100% agree. So thank you so much for being so authentic and transparent with your journey. I really know people will resonate a lot with this episode, and there's so many lessons that you've shared. How can people connect with you, learn more about the business? What are the ways that they can connect from you? What's the best platform?
I've got LinkedIn. I'll give you my profile. You can link it in the
Show notes,
in the show notes for the podcast. That's probably the best way to get in touch with me. I'm always happy to help people with advice if they want to talk to me a little bit more about my journey and learn a bit more in detail about it. I offer my mentorship to a lot of uni students as well to try and get them on that right pathway. Because I think it's really important that we share our knowledge as much as we can today. There's a lot of challenges out there, but they're also exciting challenges, and they're challenges I think we can overcome.
Yeah.
And we can enjoy it while we do it.
And with every challenge is an opportunity.
100%.
Just peeking around the corner. So I love that you're doing that, and I encourage people to share. And please do share with the guests what you get out of the episode. Everyone that loves that, if you connect with them on LinkedIn and you learnt something or took something away, please do share that.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
People love hearing that. Thank you so much. As always, like, share, subscribe, rate, review, all of the above. But what I just love to do is hear that you've shared it with somebody, and someone connects with us and tells us that they got something about the episode. So thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Lauren.
If this episode gave you new insights, don't let them go to waste. Take action, apply them. And if you want more insider strategies from the best in construction and infrastructure, make sure to subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, the leaders who open the most doors aren't waiting for opportunities, they're building them.